Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. As many of us approach midlife, we've certainly experienced our share of pain. Oh boy, that dreaded pain, whether it's a toothache or a sore back or you sprained your ankle, or perhaps it could be something a lot more devastating where, like our guest today, who was in a car crash in 2002, which resulted in a post-traumatic fibromyalgia, leaving her in great physical pain. But as we hear, with every adversity, there sows a seed of success, an opportunity for us to grow, and it was through that growth that our guest today began doing a series of multimodal coaching programs for people who live with chronic pain. And at the heart of these teachings, you can find out how you can move beyond the pain cycle, living in the cycle of thriving, which is an amazing journey that here and now you will be able to take. So you can go from ow to wow. And we're going to find out how you can get your life back by learning how to thrive with pain. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program our guest, Amber Rose. Amber, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. Great being here.
Now, again, give us a little more detail about what happened and how this inspired you to move the direction that you have with your life.
Well, what happened, as you said, was that I did have a car accident in 2002, and it wasn't a big car accident, no big sirens or landing in the hospital, but it was something that slowly over time I realized that instead of getting better, I was getting worse. And so it took about a year to finally get diagnosed. I had been a massage therapist and a massage teacher, so I was very involved with kind of chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, and that was kind of the route that I took to start with. And like I said, instead of getting better, the pain kept getting worse. I was having short-term memory issues. I wasn't able to do massage anymore. And I felt by the time the first year rolled around, wow, if I am having this kind of experience, just imagine somebody who had no experience with alternative healing or, doctors or anything like that, what their experience might be. Mm-hmm. So, what I ended up doing was just continuing to plod on, and it took me about 3 or 4 years, I would say, by the time I felt like I had gotten the answers that I needed to figure out how to begin to self-manage in a way that made sense for me in my life. And I decided that, with all of my background in whole systems design and being a massage therapist and an educator, I wanted to become a coach. Mm-hmm. And so I began doing coaching, and then it just became really clear that, what am I most passionate about? What am I most knowledgeable about in my life? And it was really pain, mm-hmm. Living with it and learning to get through it and being able to have a life again and not letting it drag you down. So that's when I started really in earnest looking at thriving with pain and developing, as you said, the out of wow. I have 5 steps from out of wow and developed the thriving cycle.
Now, as you were diagnosed with this post-traumatic fibromyalgia, you were given tools, hope, and support to get the insurance company to believe that you weren't faking it. So you were having a challenge with insurance companies on this as well, right?
Yes. Anytime you're in a car accident and it's not your fault, mm-hmm. or even if it is, you have insurance companies kind of coming in. And there's also sort of the whole thing of they'll only do it for about a year, and then after that, you're on your own medical insurance. So it's really important to have practitioners that can hear that what you're dealing with is real. As a matter of fact, I just had a client telling me, yesterday or the day before that she had gone to a new rheumatologist, and she was saying that she had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and the doctor actually rolled his eyes and was like, oh, well, we don't really know that that's real.
Not the doctors again, please.
Yeah, so you just kind of go, oh my gosh, this week is actually a National Pain Awareness Week, and
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when I heard this, I was like, oh, give me his name, his address, his phone number. I'm calling him. It exists. It's real. You may not understand all of the reasons why, but that doesn't mean that for the person who is living with the pain that it's not real. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's still an uphill battle because pain is something that, most pain, at least at this point, there aren't any lab tests that they can take.
Right.
And say, oh, yes, this person is in pain or this person is faking. And so it's very frustrating for doctors and practitioners, especially with people with chronic pain, because they don't necessarily get better the way that they want them to.
Right.
And they don't know what to do. And then they just get frustrated and upset. And then the patient or the client or the person who's actually living with the pain is, being told, oh, well, whatever, you just have to learn to live with it.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking of the movie G.I. Jane. Don't know if you've heard of this one, but
yes.
In the movie, it's about a woman who actually goes into Navy SEAL training. Mm-hmm. And there was an interesting scene in there, which it seems like from your message I'm hearing loud and clear here, which I think is very encouraging, is the Master Chief, the one who's training everybody, says, pain is your friend. Pain lets you know that you are still alive.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And there's no doubt about that. There are times that the pain's so bad you wish you were dead.
Right, exactly. And that's actually a really good point. In terms of pain, we are alive, and in being alive, pain is definitely something that all of us will experience one way or another. But it's the kind of pain and what it's actually doing to our bodies that I think, and to our minds, and to our emotions that have, an impact on our quality of life. Mm-hmm. You've all heard the idea of, oh, well, that was a good pain. Mm-hmm. And that's because you've had a good workout and you're just sore the next day and you know that you're healing and, things are going good and you're building your muscles. That's like the good pain. There's nothing wrong with that. It's something that you have a little bit of control over, like you didn't have to run that last mile. Right. But for people who have chronic pain where it's not something that they've done, it's not something that's good, our bodies actually change. The whole neurology changes, and we end up not having the sense of control. People with chronic pain actually tend to have a lower threshold of pain, which means we begin feeling pain sooner, so there's a higher sensitivity, but then we have a higher pain tolerance. For a lot of people that have chronic pain, they run around and with probably, a pain of, let's say, 7 or an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. But they're still doing their life because they've learned to live with it. They've learned to deal with it and be able to pace around it and do all those kinds of things. Whereas somebody who's never really experienced much pain in their life and they get a 7 or 8, they're flat on their back.
Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, that does remind me of a time years ago where I ended up getting some sort of an Asian flu, and it was something that just came on, and interesting of all places, it was at the zoo. And all I could say to my partners, I said, we need to go home and you're going to need to drive. It just really came on. It was just really wild how that worked. And so I get home and everything, of course I was feeling pretty miserable, but that evening, slowly the galloping horse of a migraine headache came on. And I'm not someone who gets headaches usually, and if I do, I can kind of maybe lay down for a few minutes, massage my eyes and that sort of a thing. I don't even really need aspirin too much. But this here laid me out with a migraine headache, and I was like, oh my goodness, I could not believe how bad this really was. It was where I was literally beating my head on the wall because I was so frustrated because it would never go away, and just, the extremeness of it. And I thought, here's me, that was 1 or 2 days. There are people that experience like the migraine experience. It'll be for weekends and regularly. And in fact, I had a friend that for years I had no idea that she was actually having those kinds of experiences because of how she was living. And finally it came around where I discovered, you mean to tell me you've been living with migraine headaches off and on for most of your life? And she says, yeah. And I said, I never knew. And it's really amazing how, as you were saying earlier, people reach that level of being able to cope and actually move forward and thrive under those conditions, because believe me, if I had to endure a migraine for more than a day and a half, I don't know what I would have done. It was just that maddening.
Yeah. I know my partner has had migraines for about 30 years.
Wow.
And, at least 2 or 3 a month. And, I've had migraines as well, but not to that extent, usually only 1 or 2 a month. But that's, that's exactly right. It's amazing how many people do live with chronic pain, and people just don't know about it because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to whine about it. They don't want to have be pitied. They don't necessarily want to talk about it all the time. But a third of the population in the United States lives with chronic pain.
Wow.
So if you know 3 people, at least one of them lives with chronic pain. It's amazing.
Now, let's get an idea here, if you could, Amber, for our listeners. Now, what is it, or how is it that you coach or support people who decide, first of all, how they decide they want to come to you in the first place? Because I know that you're talking about beyond pain management itself, but you're talking about how you can thrive in spite of this to move forward anyway. What is it that you actually do or help people with?
Well, my philosophy and kind of how I look at this, and it really grew out of my own experience and talking with a lot of people and doing a lot of research about what helps people to get beyond, that suffering and blaming either themselves or the medical or, for me it would have been the car accident or whatever that triggering event is, to being able to kind of become a survivor where you're no longer at the mercy of it, and then to be able to get to the place where you can actually thrive. And for me, I had done a book right before my car accident in 2002. I finally finished my book. It was called Path of Heart, Personal and Planetary Healing. And the definition of healing that I was working with right then, and it's still the definition I work with, is recognizing wholeness that already exists. So it's not about fixing something or trying to make something different. It's about recognizing the wholeness. And what you said earlier about the car accident and how, some kind of event then allows you to have the gift that comes out of it. That to me is where the healing comes from. So I wrote this book. I got it printed. 2 weeks later, I was in my car accident, and since then, I've been living with a vengeance what healing actually means to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very personal, very real experience, and it's not always easy to remember that and to not get into all of that. And so I find that support, having somebody outside of yourself who gets what it means to be living with pain, and who can basically navigate through the waters of the pain cycle, the getting the knowledge and the skills and developing attitudes that are going to help you to be a survivor and a thriver, is where, what I bring to the table is really bringing that kind of navigation. So how I work with people, it's like you said at the beginning, it's multimodal. So I can work with people through email. They can get support just through my website and getting the newsletter. I work on the phone or in person. And what I will do is talk with people, find out where they're at, because everybody's story is different. What have they tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked? What do they believe would be the next best thing for them? And then be able to support them in just having, I don't know if accountability is the right word when you're talking about somebody in pain, but it's the support to take those next steps.
Maybe not to feel victimized, right?
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that it was something different than what it was coming to, so I figured victimization has to be sort of that poor me, Because you tend to sometimes, I think we've all met or know people like this when they're having their aches and pains, whatever it may be. They could have maybe broken a leg or an arm or something, and it's, can you do this for me? And all of a sudden they just become tremendously helpless.
Right.
And sometimes I think that you actually encourage more of that behavior by saying, let me anything, whatever I can do, sort of a thing. And I know that years ago, as I had to work with my son who had to learn to walk again because of something that had happened to him, and I knew that that was painful for him. And there were moments that you had to be sort of the hard father coach, and I don't mean, emotionally hard, but, push him a little bit. And then there were times you just realized he has done everything he possibly can just to get this far. Cut him a break, pick him up, and carry him to the car. You just knew, especially when it comes to kids. And I think children are such marvelous examples of, that resilience that you're talking about, to be able to get up in spite of what they have in front of them and to move forward in spite of the situation. And, you kind of look at these adults that play that sort of, poor me, and you say, would you quit sniveling? And it's almost an insult to say, like a baby, because babies just don't do that. They really live with it. They tolerate it. They take it in and they just move forward. They try to be happy and pleasing anyway. So
Right. Well, but it's also a skill level.
Right.
That resilience. I mean, when you said about your migraine and it's only a couple of days or whatever, just like there's skills around being able to learn how to pace yourself, knowing when to push, knowing when to give yourself a break. And sometimes that can be really difficult to understand and find that balance. Because oftentimes with chronic pain, you don't get the right away response to the pain. It's not like you step off a curb and all of a sudden the pain is there. It's
Right.
like you step off a curb and the next day you're on your back with pain. So making the connections between what you're doing and the response can sometimes be delayed, which can also make it difficult to figure that out.
Now, Amber, as you work with people, what have been, I guess, if you will, some of the feedback that you've received from people when they've decided to step into this journey?
Mostly the feedback has been that um, once we've come to kind of an end place, and they're going off with what I call the Thriving with Pain plan, which is a plan that they develop with me around those 5 steps from Out of Wow. But they feel more empowered. They feel like while they were working with me, we created a space that was very safe and nurturing. But they also are walking away with very practical things that they can do for themselves and resources and places that they can be reaching out to.
Mm-hmm. I understand that you have worked with healthcare practitioners to help them to understand people who have chronic pain to where they can get to a place of understanding so that they can work better with the person. Is that true?
Yes, yes.
Because I know you said that was a barrier earlier, is that this pain isn't something you can really weigh and measure too easily.
Right, exactly. And often I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is also a chiropractor. I've known her for years and years prior to my accident, and we were talking about how the medical field is actually moving towards functional scales as opposed to pain scales, because pain is something that's so subjective, but functional is a little bit more objective, like they were able to do their dishes or they weren't able to do the dishes, or, that kind of thing. And she was saying, well, if they're in pain, they're not going to be able to do that. And I said, no. Right. Just like you said with your friend, it's amazing the adaptation that we can do to be able to do things even in pain. So, that's also the kind of thing is like, just imagine for yourself, like you said, at the zoo, you just start feeling bad and, or imagine you just had the achy part of the flu. Mm. Some people live with that achy feeling every day.
Right.
And it's exhausting. It's, so what do they, how they show up at the doctor, they're achy, but they're still somehow pushing themselves through to be able to do what they need to do. But if a doctor doesn't understand that that doesn't mean the pain isn't there, then they get treated as if the pain isn't real.
That's not an easy place to be in, that's for sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think for the listeners here, since your demographic is people who are getting a little older, oftentimes people will think, oh, well, I'm just getting older, here's some aches and pains, I'm just going to have to learn to live with it. But there's a lot of things that people can do to help with, like, lower back sprains, arthritis, just what people kind of think is the normal aches and pains of aging, where they don't necessarily have to be experiencing that. So that's the other piece in my work is, really looking at if there is a way to get rid of the pain, if there are things that you can be doing, then I'm all for it. I don't think you should run around in pain just because, you have it. Mm-hmm. It's, the second step in the Out of Wow is treatment, is finding things to help you with that.
So for our listeners out there, give us some clarity about what it is you help people to do.
Well, what I really do is I help people to reflect on what they already know, because oftentimes when you're living with pain, it's really easy to not cut yourself any slack and not really acknowledge what it is that you're already good at. So acknowledging that, being able to look at how to approach pain in a way that allows for that quote-unquote good pain, listens to what the pain is trying to tell you. Is it saying, just keep pushing through, or is it saying you need some rest? Do you need, to do some exercise to help other parts? And then, doing that really needs persistence and resilience and commitment. And so those are the pieces that I, help people to develop. And then the next is really, for me in my journey, having been a massage therapist and doing the chiropractic, I really found a lot of tools when I went up to OHSU here in Portland to their fibromyalgia clinic and got my diagnosis and got a lot of tools from it. I got some information, it got sent back to my doctor, and then I was on my own. So what I have done with my coaching is that, I take what people learn, help them to navigate, to find places where they can get treatment that can work for them, and then have them be able to bring that back, and we work with it. How can you stay on track with that? Another sort of third step in the kind of going through the 5 steps here. The third step is really about support, and it can be really intimidating for some people to ask for help. Sometimes they don't even know what they need for help. And sometimes they need not to be asking for help. Like you said, sometimes, they need to do for themselves. So really figuring out how to communicate about that and how to give other people support, because this is an opportunity to take that experience and support other people who are in pain. For me, I realized that a lot of people didn't want to talk about this, and I was very visible in saying, this is my experience. I don't expect anybody to do anything about it, but I'm also not going to hide that this is part of what's going on.
Well, I think, too, what's really important for the listeners to really understand here is our societal attitude toward pain. Generally, when we think of pain, we think of weakness, and nobody wants to be thought of as being weak, okay?
Yeah.
So this makes this an opportunity for me to ask you a question that I think is very unique. This is something everybody has probably heard. If you've been to the gym, you've heard this. No pain, no gain. What are your thoughts on that statement?
If you are a healthy person with no pain issues and you're trying to build up your muscles, then basically what that is saying is that you have to push past what you think your point of endurance is. And then your body can build back up. Kind of like what they said, going back to the G.I. Jane movie that you mentioned earlier, same idea. Mm-hmm. But for people who have an injury, and have an acute pain, for people who have chronic pain for whatever reasons, arthritis, fibromyalgia, MS, there's just so many disease processes that include pain. Pushing is going to increase your body's attempt to deal with the pain, which normally will cycle into more pain. So I think it's a very individual answer to that question, which is, again, why I think what I do is very important. Most doctors can't take more than 10, 15 minutes to sit and talk with somebody. Physical therapists are set up for being able to train you in the kinds of exercises you can do and stretching and that sort of thing. A coach like myself can help to reflect more. I have more time with my clients, and I'm coming at it from a perspective of, what's the gain that you want to have? And what's going to happen if you do push yourself into pain more than what you normally have? Is your body going to get better, or is your body going to get worse? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a massage therapist, I tended, my work was very gentle. I did do deep tissue work, but I did deep tissue very gently. So I tried not to hurt my clients. and there's definitely massage therapists out there that, no pain, no gain. They get in there, they, really get the muscles and do that. So, and some people respond really well to that. They don't feel like they're getting a good massage unless they're getting that. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's definitely one of those things, though, that if you are finding yourself with more and more pain after doing something, and it's starting to cycle out of just being an acute or when I say that, I just mean an event that just happens right now and it's going to clear itself up, to being something that turns into chronic, which is, a much usually longer experience, and is something that the tissue itself may not be damaged at all. It's the nerves are doing a feedback loop, and the pain keeps coming up even though the tissue itself might be fine now, like a broken bone or something like that might turn into being chronic pain later.
Now, Amber, how can our listeners find out how to get in touch with you? Is there a website they can find?
Oh, you bet. My website is www.thrivingwithpain.com, and it's the phone number is 503-810-4163.
Very good. Amber, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today and sharing with our listeners the opportunity to be able to reach out to someone who might have a good understanding of where they're at in life and where they want to be.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
You bet. And that's thrivingwithpain.com is the website, correct?
That's correct.
Very good. We'll also be sure to have a link on our website as well. Amber Rose joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. I want to thank you so much for being here, and for you listeners out there tuning in regularly, as you always do every week. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, live your day past halfway.